Whenever we think about a massive democracy like India, it is so easy to just picture the politicians or, honestly, the sheer staggering number of voters. But for this explainer, I want you to think of India a little differently. Try picturing it not just as a country, but as a massive, deeply complex structure, an absolute architectural marvel of governance. We are going to explore the very skeleton that keeps this colossal nation standing upright, balancing the weight of over 1 billion people. We're diving straight into the architecture of power itself, federalism and decentralization.
Okay, let's dive into this. We'll start with the blueprint, then move to constructing the nation. Check out India's floor plan, look at federalism in practice, and finally, wrap up with adding a ground floor.
So, first up, the blueprint, defining the rules of federalism.
Federalism is essentially the vertical division of power. Just imagine a towering skyscraper. The management isn't just sitting up in the penthouse dictating every single tiny detail to the folks on the ground floor. Instead, power is divided between that central authority and the various constituent units, like states or provinces. This structure is absolutely crucial because it fundamentally prevents a single, central authority from ruling absolutely. It makes sure power is shared all the way down the line. Now, to actually make a federation work in reality, there are some non-negotiable structural rules. It's not just a casual handshake agreement, right? This stuff has to be baked right into the Constitution. You absolutely need at least 2 tiers of government. You need ironclad rules saying one level cannot just rewrite the Constitution on a whim. It requires mutual consent. You also need an independent judiciary, like a Supreme Court, to act as the umpire when those different levels inevitably clash. And super importantly, you need guaranteed financial autonomy, because without a clear, independent source of revenue, a state government is basically just a puppet. Ultimately, all of this serves a dual objective, safeguarding the unity of the whole country while actually giving a real voice to its regional diversity.
So, sticking with our architectural metaphor, jurisdiction means every tier of government has its own specific sandbox to play in. It is the exact legally defined area where they have the authority to make laws, collect taxes, and administer the rules. And in a true federation, this sandbox is strictly guaranteed by the Constitution. The central government can't just casually step in and take over a state's sandbox.
Let's move on to Section 2, Constructing the Nation, Coming Together versus Holding Together Models.
It's really fascinating how differently countries actually choose to build their federal structures. You've got 2 entirely different approaches here. On one side, we have coming together federations. This is a very bottom-up approach. Think of the USA, Switzerland, or Australia. Here, previously independent states look around, realize there's massive strength and security in numbers, and decide to pool their sovereignty to form a bigger unit. Because they came together voluntarily, the states generally retain equal power and are pretty much just as strong as the federal government. On the flip side, we have holding together federations, like India, Spain, or Belgium. This is much more of a top-down power division. A large, diverse country decides the absolute best way to manage its vastness is to intentionally divide its power between the national government and newly created states. And in this model, the central government almost always remains structurally stronger than the states.
Which brings us nicely to Section 3, India's floor plan. The 3 lists of power. The Indian Constitution handles all this jurisdiction stuff through 3 very specific lists, basically mapping out exactly who gets to build what. First up is the Union List. These are subjects of sheer, undeniable national importance. We're talking defense, foreign affairs, currency. Obviously, you can't have different currencies in different states, so only the central government makes laws here. Next is the State List. These are matters of everyday, local importance. Police, agriculture, irrigation. Only the state government handles these. Finally, you have the Concurrent List. These are subjects of common interest, like education and forests, where both the center and the state can make laws. But what happens if they butt heads? Well, the Constitution acts as the ultimate rulebook. If there's a conflict on a concurrent subject, the central law prevails.
But you have to hand it to the architects of the Indian Constitution. They were incredibly forward-thinking. I mean, they knew they couldn't predict the future back in 1950. What about things that literally didn't exist yet, like computer software or cyber laws? These are called residuary subjects, and the rule they set up is brilliant in its simplicity. Anything totally new that pops up automatically falls right under the authority of the central government.
All right, let's see what happens when things get real in Section 4, Federalism in Practice, Stress Testing the Building.
So, I want to pose this question to you. If success isn't just about what's neatly written on paper, how is federalism actually practiced in reality? Because a building might look absolutely perfect on an architectural blueprint, but how does it withstand an actual earthquake?
In India, those earthquakes are politics, regional identities, and language.
Actually, one of the earliest and most intense stress tests for the country was the massive demand for linguistic states. Shortly after independence, people loudly demanded that state boundaries be completely redrawn based on the language people spoke. Now, initially, national leaders were terrified of this. They thought dividing the country by language would completely fracture the nation and lead to disintegration. But look at what actually happened. Redrawing borders to create states like Maharashtra or Punjab based on language didn't break the building apart at all. It actually strengthened its structural integrity. It made the country more united and, practically speaking, made administration significantly easier because the local government finally spoke the exact same language as the local people.
And hey, speaking of language, think about the number 21 for a second. India doesn't even have one single national language. While Hindi is the official language of the government, the Constitution legally recognizes 21 other languages as scheduled languages. Literally, a candidate taking a central government exam can opt to take it in any single one of these languages. Just imagine the sheer logistical flex required to manage that. But it shows perfectly how a holding together federation bends and flexes to accommodate immense diversity, rather than just snapping under the pressure of trying to force uniformity.
Now, another massive practical test for Indian federalism was political power dynamics. Specifically, the era of the coalition government. This happens when no single political party manages to win a clear majority on its own, so they have to team up, forming an alliance of two or more parties just to form the government. So why is this a complete game changer for federalism? Well, because for a really long time, Indian politics was entirely dominated by a single party. Before the 1990s, the exact same party often ruled both at the center in New Delhi and in most of the states. In practice, this completely undermined federal autonomy, because the central party leadership would just dictate terms to the state leaders. But shift to the post-1990s era, and we saw the massive rise of regional state parties. Suddenly, no single national party could get a majority, leading to this whole era of coalition governments. National parties literally had to make alliances with regional state parties just to survive in power at the center. This political reality check forced the central government to actually follow the federal blueprint. They couldn't just dismiss state governments anymore because they relied heavily on those exact same state leaders to hold on to power.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, adding a ground floor, the shift to decentralization. So, decentralization is when power is actively taken from the central and state governments and pushed even further down to the local level. And the 1992 constitutional amendment changed absolutely everything. It transformed local panchayats in villages and municipalities in cities from these weak, sort of optional bodies into a powerful, constitutionally backed third tier of democracy. How? By legally mandating regular elections, by officially reserving seats for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes to ensure true, fair representation, by creating completely independent state election commissions to guarantee those elections were actually fair, and perhaps most importantly, state governments were constitutionally mandated to share both real power and actual revenue with these local bodies. They basically brought democracy right to the citizens' backyard.
And I really want to highlight this massive structural shift. 1/3. The 1992 amendment made a truly revolutionary change by reserving 1/3 of all positions in these local government bodies exclusively for women. This changed the game overnight, bringing hundreds of thousands of women directly into the formal political architecture of the country.
Now, right at the absolute foundation of this entire new ground floor is the Gram Sabha. And this is so cool. This isn't some exclusive council of elected officials. This comprises literally all the adult voters in a village. This local citizen body actually meets to approve the annual budget of the local Gram Panchayat and physically review its performance. This puts structural oversight directly into the hands of local, everyday citizens. It completely decentralizes power, proving that sometimes the absolute best way to govern a massive country is to simply let local people solve their own local problems.
So, we have covered a ton of ground in this explainer today, looking at the true architectural marvel of how a nation holding over 1 billion people actually organizes its power. From the highest union list all the way down to the local village Gram Sabha. The entire structure is held together by this one core principle. Federalism must constantly balance a dual objective: to safeguard the unity of a massive country while deeply accommodating its endless regional diversity. It is just an incredible balancing act. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this to chew on. Look around your own community. Does your local government actually reflect this balance? Thanks so much for exploring the architecture of power with me. Keep observing and keep learning.